Hi, welcome to another episode in our Creative Careers series where we interview people with arts-related careers from all over, from every arts discipline out there. So today we have two guests. Our guests today are Linda and Jim Weingar, who are potters. So thank you so much, first of all, for being in our episode here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Awesome. So let's start with the very basics. What exactly does a potter do? And maybe specifically for you and your profession, what does that look like for you?
Well, we've been at it for actually this past year. We celebrated our 50th year of working in clay and producing and selling our wares and things. And potters work with clay, number one, and there's a huge variety of things that potters do with the clay. It's an incredibly flexible and versatile material. We do mostly functional pottery items, so we're doing vessels, including things like teapots, casseroles,
things like
mugs, and
things that people use every day.
vases,
bowls that you might eat your cereal out of, or
dinnerware.
have your popcorn in, or
Mhm.
we make everything from dinnerware to we make planters for plants. Most of what we do really ourselves is functional pottery. We like to make things that people use.
And we work mostly on the potter's wheel. Unfortunately, we don't have Wi-Fi in our studio, or it would be probably more interesting to be there. But I would suggest that if anybody's interested, we have a website, and it's weingarpottery.com. And on there are videos of us working, and there's certainly a lot of images of the types of things that we do and all that kind of thing. So that might be a good resource. But when potters work in clay, it's a very malleable material. Clay is a type of soil, but it's a very unique type of material. Especially the clay that we use is a mixture of a number of different clays to create a particular type of consistency to the material that works very well working on a potter's wheel. And when we work on a potter's wheel, contemporary potters call it throwing pots on the potter's wheel. And it's a particular process that you go through to first do what's called centering the clay, and then you manipulate the clay with your hands to create a vessel, whether it's, as we said, a mug like this. This part of the body of the piece was thrown on a potter's wheel, and then the handle was added afterwards. There's a whole procedure in terms of once you make something on a potter's wheel, you have to let it stiffen up because it's very sort of floppy and soft and could be distorted and changed very easily. So you make the piece on the potter's wheel, set it aside. In our studio, we have shelves and wear boards that we put the things on to let them stiffen up, because they oftentimes have to have a number of things done to them, whether it's trimming the bottom of the piece or putting a handle on it, or you can give me this mug. And this is a mug that the body of the piece, this part of it, was done on the potter's wheel, and then we let it stiffen up and added this handle to it. But we also did a lot of carving with a little metal loop tool, just a tool that's round, and we carve those sort of grooves into the surface in patterns, and we do everything from leaves and other types of things. And once that piece is completed in terms of that process of carving and putting the handle on, it has to dry completely. Then it gets fired in a kiln called a bisque kiln, and then that firing takes about 6-7 hours, and it's fired to about a little under 1700 degrees Fahrenheit. And that changes the clay from clay to ceramic. And that then is sort of halfway in the process of finishing a piece. Once you get the piece bisque fired, then we apply glazes to the piece. Linda has another mug that has a couple of different glazes on it, and the glaze is all the chemical components of glass, but it's in a powdered form, suspended in water, and we dip or pour or brush the glaze on the piece. Then it goes back into another kiln, and it's fired about 10 hours to 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. And that part of the process, the glaze is 2,300 degrees is about the melting point of glass, and the glazes, as I said, are a glass surface bonded to the clay, and that then finishes the piece basically in terms of
So the long and short of it is it's a long process. You don't
Right.
just make something and it's finished like some other materials that you work with. Like painting, you might finish a painting all in one sitting. You might do a small painting, maybe you finish it in an hour or something, but with clay, we have all these different steps. So when we work, we have a lot of pieces in progress at the same time. Like we make a group of mugs, together. We don't just make one and then follow that to the finish. We're making lots of things and setting them aside and coming back to them. And so there's a lot of different activities going on before we get a whole kiln load full. There's probably about close to 100 pots in the final glaze firing that when we do that. So we're working on lots of things, at the same time.
I'd love to hear a little bit about your journeys to get here. When were you first interested in art, and when did pottery in specific really stand out to you as something you wanted to do?
Yeah, we have a little bit different stories there, but those stories eventually converge. I grew up out in the country, and we had a pond and streams and things in our area, and I would go down with my mom when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. I remember going down and digging clay out of the side of a bank and coming up and making turtles and whatever with them. We
Little pinch pots.
couldn't fire the pieces, but we had that was the first introduction to clay. And then of course through our elementary school we had a pretty good art program, and got to actually do clay there. I actually have my first piece I ever fired in clay that I did in second grade. It's quite a nice piece. So. But then we eventually, and this is where things converge, we went to the same university, Indiana University of Pennsylvania. We had an extraordinary teacher there, and we were both getting art education degrees, but we had very good studio programs. And the one person, a man named Frank Ross, was our clay instructor, and he really engaged a lot of people and really got people enthused. And that's where
we met in the pottery studio in college. So, and my background is I came from 2 counties away from where he was, so we didn't know each other before college, but I never touched clay until I was in college. I mean, I might have played with Play-Doh, when I was a child, but I never did anything with actual clay until that first course that I took in college. I was really interested in drawing and painting and, all of the more visual arts, and knew I wanted to be an art teacher. So, but when I went to college and I saw people in the pot shop, we called it the pot shop, it was the pottery studio, and it was in the basement of a building with windows that you could see down into the basement level. And when I saw people throwing pots down there, I said, oh, wow, that looks really interesting. I want to do that. But I had to wait till my sophomore year because you couldn't take that particular course your freshman year. So, but that's when I got into clay then, and, it was love from there on. So.
Yeah, so I'm curious, jumping off of that, where I like how, Linda, you pointed out that you had other artistic interests that you were kind of going toward, and I'm curious for each of you, what really draws you to pottery specifically above any other artistic careers? What is it about pottery that makes you and that a really good fit?
Well, as we mentioned, we had an incredible uh, pottery instructor, and he really, and like I said, engaged. We have friends. There's probably at least a dozen friends that are still in the field of pottery in varying capacities and things. So that was certainly a pivotal part of it. But clay itself is really an intriguing material. It's one of the few materials that you can add it together, you can take it apart, you can carve it, you can do any number of things, and
Yeah.
you don't need
You can go
a
both
welder,
directions.
you don't need a table saw,
Yeah.
you don't need a lot of different things. You can sit at a table with a lump of clay and create a really interesting piece with very, very little peripheral kind of things.
You can just hand build something without a potter's wheel, just with a lump of clay. So, and there's just something, I don't know, there's something almost spiritual about it. When you're working with the clay, you just kind of get lost in, you can just lose yourself. It's that way with a lot of creative materials, I think. But I don't know, there's just something different about clay that, it's something magical. When I get on the potter's wheel and I start throwing pots, I can just get lost in it and not be thinking about any other problems or, anything else. And, I love that. And then the other thing is I really like making things that people use. We do craft shows and arts festivals and things. We aren't doing any right now, but, when we're at something like that and somebody comes up to me and says, "Oh, I have a mug that I bought from you last year and I use it every day." Well, that makes my
Or
heart
20
go
years
boom,
ago.
boom. Yeah. Or a bowl they eat their cereal out of in the morning. So I don't know. There's just something about that that's joyful. So
No, I think I like that a lot. So obviously there is very obviously artistic skill involved in learning to work the material and use the different tools. And but what were some of the skills, either specifically artistic or otherwise, that you needed to work on the most to get to a professional level?
Well, again, back to the potter's wheel. It's our main tool. We do some hand building and slab work, and then we certainly, after we've done a form on the potter's wheel, we do a lot of manipulating of it. But that's certainly our most basic tool, and it takes a significant period of time to feel comfortable with being able to master the idea of, well, okay, I have a lump of clay and I'm going to turn it into a vase or
specifically what you want.
And
then glazing is also another challenging, a lot of people think, well, that's the creative part is just throwing the pot. But glazing is really tricky as well. So there's a lot of skill involved in learning how to we do a lot of layering with our glazes. Like we'll put one glaze over another, and in some bowls, we'll show you an example, before the end here, of a bowl where we pour in glaze and let it mix, over top different layers. And then the firing is also another skill, the particular kind of firing we do. There's things that you do during the firing of the kiln with the ratio of the fuel to air that's going into the kiln. So there's a lot of things to learn there. And then as far as the professional side, when you get to actually marketing your work, putting it out there for people to buy, then there's a lot of other skills you have to learn about marketing skills and maybe how to take a good photograph of your work, because, you have maybe have a brochure, you have business cards, there's sometimes some of those jobs go out to other people. Our daughter happens to be in advertising, so she does her business cards for us now. But before she was that, when she was a child, we were doing our own business cards and our own brochures and all of those things. And then you have to learn something about the business of how do you sell your work? Where do you go? And a lot of those things that we learned by observing other people and just, workshops. And we would go to workshops where other potters were showing you, new techniques and things like that. So.
And back to the person, Frank Ross, that taught us clay, he was very good in terms of giving you a whole range of skills, not just working on a potter's wheel or understanding how to fire the pieces or whatever. But very early on, he would take us out to either exhibits, gallery exhibits, or even festivals. He did festivals and shows where he would, take his pottery work out and set it up and sell it. And we would help in that sort of thing. So it was
So you could
a very
observe somebody else
broad
doing,
range of, ways that you could, potentially create a career out of it.
As we close out today, I want to toss out, right now, the people who are watching this are most likely students who are stuck at home inside. They don't have an opportunity to go out and take a class anywhere. Is there anything that you would suggest that a student do that they could do at home, maybe with very simple resources that could help them build these skills, even if they don't have access to a teacher or to all the tools that you might use every day? What's something that they might be able to do to build toward that skill if this was something they wanted to do?
With the age of the internet things, there are tremendous resources in terms of just, I actually, for the last, few weeks, we have a number of art teacher friends that obviously are not in their classrooms right now. And a couple of people I've been giving them links to really good and interesting, pottery how-tos, whether they're, throwing on a potter's wheel or, other people firing techniques and things of that.
there are a
sort.
lot of demonstrations
So
of, hand
YouTube
building and,
whatever is a good resource, but you can do some neat things with that.
there's a lot of interesting websites. You can just, Google, handmade pottery or, and look for go to different potters' websites and just start looking at, shapes that you like, colors that you like, things like that. Do some sketches of things that you might like to, when you get back in a classroom, be able to, maybe you want to sculpt something or do some sketches of some things that interest you. And hey, how about some pots?
Yeah.
Let's see a couple before we close out.
So when we were talking about things that we do with our clay, like this is a cover jar. So, but some years ago, I really love rocks, really love stones, gemstones. And so I got into doing these jars. I call them spirit jars. They're for your spirit. And I add stones on. This is after I've made the piece, after they're fired. So I do a series of these things. So that's something, different. That's a little bit, unusual. And
let's see.
show a teapot.
Yeah, this is a teapot. I do a more traditional formed one, but this functions very well, and it's just sort of a unique design that is interesting. We'll usually do some teacups with it and things, but it's has the carving on it. This has a teal glaze. The other jar that Linda had is a glaze we call granite, which is a real stony, earthy kind of thing.
And then here's another, big bowl that, would be a serving bowl that people would use. And this is what I was talking about.
With the glaze.
Yeah, the glaze, how we pour glaze in and then swish it around and,
We make all our own glazes. In fact, the red glaze that you're seeing there, I made as basically a student project. We were required to design and create our own recipes for glazes, which oftentimes that's not taught in the programs as well, but our clay instructor insisted on that and really gave us a good background in that. So all of the glazes that we use are our own recipes, and it just gives you another sort of identifier to make our pieces unique. So it's, it's one of those things that we very much appreciated the learning that we had. This is a casserole. Take the lid off. Yeah.
So you can see the carving, on the top of the piece as well.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different directions you can go in with clay. why we like it so much.
Yeah, fantastic. I really, really appreciate you being willing to share this information with us and with our viewers. So once again, thank you so much for joining us for this.
Oh, you're so
Very,
welcome.
very welcome.
I hope it's helpful to somebody.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. All right, viewers, thank you so much for tuning in, and don't forget to tune in again tomorrow at 1 p.m. for more Let's Be Creative Arts content. Thank you.